The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robert Russignello. I'm a senior consultant at SWK, and today we will be reviewing, dissecting, demystifying the Visual Integrator module. This is a great module that allows us to import and export data from the system. I would say mostly import data because exporting data we can certainly do through Crystal reports, we can do through Excel queries, but I'll show you how we would export data from the system and maybe why we'd want to go to Visual Integrator to export data from the system. So we'll walk through export job maintenance to pull information out of the system. We'll also go through import job maintenance, and for today's session, we're going to review uploading a journal entry into General Journal Entry. We'll also upload an invoice into AP Invoice Entry. But I'll kind of walk through really the different fields and types that are commonly used in Visual Integrator so that you can really use it to upload information into any area of the system. So with that said, let's jump into the Visual Integrator module. I'm in the ABC company, and in the Visual Integrator module, there's really not much. All you're going to have is a main menu. Okay, I'll explain why I have a jobs menu in a few minutes, but in the main menu, we have the ability to create import jobs or jobs going into the system. We can create export jobs, pulling information out of Sage. Job select is where we want to give users the ability to run jobs but not alter them. And there's a couple more utilities. If we created a job and we want to push that job into your system, there's a couple of utilities, job import and export, that allow us to essentially move jobs from one system to another. With that said, let's take a look at export job maintenance first. So I have a job here that we're going to export the chart of accounts. Okay, I'm going to call it COA. And if you notice here under the table listings, we have the ability to export information from almost every table in the system, or at least I do. The table layout of the system is by module. So we have the AP module. I'm going to go to the GL module because that's where our chart of accounts is listed. And in the GL module, there's all kinds of tables. There is the accounts table, there's the bank table, there's the budget table if you're entering budgets. So to some degree, you do have to know what you're looking for to be able to get the right information out. And usually when we have clients that aren't as familiar with working in these areas and they say, hey, I want to upload information or I want to create a VI job into import job maintenance, then we'll usually at least guide you to say, okay, you're going to create a job to AP invoice data entry, okay? And you'll point, to this table and you'll get your, you'll start the process for creating your job. Now in this case, I'm going to be exporting our chart of accounts. So I know that that information is in the table called GL account. So I'm going to select that table. And now I get to, it asks me if this is a new job, which it is. And now I get to the core of the VI module. We've got 4 tabs: configuration, data, select, and sort. Configuration is really just telling us really configuration information on this job. The table name that we're pulling it out. If we wanted to give a description on what this job does, we're going to say this job exports our chart of accounts so that if other folks are researching the jobs in our system, they'll at least be able to know what this job does. The file type, we can export this as an ASCII file, as a delimited file, or as an ODBC. When we get to the import jobs, we're actually going to be able to import information from these sources, but they also give us the ability to upload information directly from Excel. In this case, I'm going to create a comma delimited file, and it's a comma delimiter here. I'm going to push this file out to my desktop, and I'm going to call it chartofaccounts.csv, and I'm going to save it. So I've told the system I'm going to get information from this table. I'm going to save it as a comma delimited file, and this is the name and the location of the file I'm creating. There are some options in here. There's the option to essentially export column names as first record. I'm going to check that off. We have options to wrap string fields in quotes. So they give us some additional options if we wanted, if we choose to use them. There's also some additional buttons down at the bottom. So a couple of ones I'll highlight. The menu button allows me to create this job and put it on the menu. So in a minute, you'll see the general journal entry is a job that we've created an import job maintenance, but we've actually separated it so that if we want certain users to only run this job, we don't necessarily have to give them rights to import job maintenance or job select. We can give them rights to run this specific job. Perform logic, this is where if a job just becomes too complex and we have to add some programming to the upload job, that's where we'll end up coming into play to assisting. But this perform area says, hey, go ahead and run a program before or after running the job. A couple of other things here, job info. If you wanted to see when the job was created and when it was run, that information after we run this job will be available here. And finally, the job log. I'll show you the job log once we run the job and what kind of information we're getting. Go to the data tab. This is where the meat of creating these jobs is held. This is where we do the mapping. So the GL account table on the left-hand side is the fields that are available in this table to pull over. So I'm going to go ahead and pull some over. I would love it if they gave us the ability to pull everything over, but they don't. So I'm going to pull them over one by one. So I'm going to pull over the account number, the account description, maybe the date start, the date end. I'm just going to pull everything over. And the next few tabs really give us the ability to filter, to say, hey, go ahead and select only accounts that are asset accounts that begin with, with a 1 or a 3. So we have the ability to filter using tab number 3, and then tab number 4 allows us to sort. If we want to sort by account number and we want to sort ascending, we can certainly do that. So now I've created a job that's going to just export our chart of accounts into a CSV file that's going to reside on our desktop. I'm going to accept the job. It's going to ask me, do I want to execute or run the job? I'm going to hit no because we're going to run it from a different area, but I have created it. So if I go back to export job maintenance, there's my job, COA, called export chart of accounts. If I go to job select, this is where I can run a job without being able to manipulate or change it. So if you have someone that manages the jobs, but you don't want them to go in there, and you don't want others to be able to manipulate or change them. You can give them rights to job select so that they can select the job, but not be able to alter it. So in this case, I'm going to job select. I am finding my file, because if it changes, we have the flexibility to go, actually, I take that back. We're going to go to desktop. We're just going to make it a chart of accounts. So if we wanted to save it in a different location, we can. And I'm going to go ahead and test it. I always like to test my jobs. And I'm going to test all records. And this will tell me if there's any issues. And of course, there is an issue because it skipped everything. And that's because I erroneously left this in here while I was showing you what was in that tab. So let me pull that out, and let's run this job one more time. And we're going to test all records. And now what I get is there are 208 accounts, and it exported 208 accounts. So at least I know I'm getting everything I asked for. Do I want to view the job log? I'm going to hit no for now. I'm going to show you what that job log does in a minute. But everything looks good, so I'm going to hit accept. And I'm going to get the same window here as expected. And now I'm going to go to my desktop because I had that file saved out to my desktop. And here's my chart of accounts as a CSV file. And we have our headers in column 1, and then our chart of accounts in a nice Excel format. So as I mentioned, this information is probably best done through a report or through an Excel query rather than the VI job. However, you may be using a third-party tool for a website or for another application that may need this information on an hourly basis. So the idea is we can create a job in VI to export that information and then have a separate job through Windows Scheduler, or even Sage now has the ability to run this job on a schedule. So not only are we exporting information, but we can have the system automatically export information without us intervening on an interval basis. So that might be where we create an export job for accounts, for items, or for orders that we want to pull over to another system. Now, what most folks normally use this module for is importing information. You may be uploading orders, you may be uploading items. In our case, I run into situations with clients quite often where they have large payroll entries, or they have end of the month entries that take them a few hours to upload from Excel. And that's a typical job that can be created in VI and uploaded, because if you're creating a job in Excel and you have to hand enter it in, and that may take 15 minutes, we can upload that information in a matter of seconds. So let me walk through first what a typical journal entry looks like. And I'm sure for folks living in the GL module, you're familiar with doing a journal entry. And so I'm coming in here and I'm creating an entry from scratch. And so in general journal entry, we have a header tab and a lines tab. So I just want you to be aware when you're creating VI jobs that the jobs will follow the flow of the entry screen. So we have the posting date, we have the journal comment in the header tab. In the lines tab, we have the account number. So let's say that I was doing depreciation, and I know that my depreciation account is our 620 account, and we're going to be debiting $1,200, and we're going to be crediting accumulated depreciation for the same amount, and I'm going to use my handy sum tool to balance it out. So this is a normal, typical journal entry where my lines tab has the account information, debits, credits, and the comment. So what I've done is now I have a Excel spreadsheet where I would normally create my journal entries to use, and this is what it would look like. In Excel, we've got our account number, we got our debits, credits, comment, posting date, transaction number, which I'll explain now why we're going to have that in here, and maybe I'm adding a user code to my Excel format. So I have enough information here to create an upload job to upload this, and not only do I have the ability to upload, but I can actually upload 2 journal entries at the same time. So I can create a multitude of journal entries in one Excel tab and pull them in, and it will create a separate entry for my payroll and a separate entry for depreciation. So I'm going to be able to use a column called transaction number simply to differentiate transaction number 1 in the system that I'm going to upload and transaction number 2. Okay. In addition, user code, I'm going to use a user code so that I can actually, in my entry, populate our comment field with the comment as well as a user code. So let's see, so now that you see how the file is, now that you kind of understand, you know, how we're going to be getting that, that information into either the header or the lines tab, we're going to take a look at a VI job for the general journal entry. And so we're going to go to a job that I've created. And if you notice here, the table name is general journal header. Again, I know that I'm pulling the information into the general journal. So, so I have to know where I'm starting, and that's where I am. I'm putting a comment here called final journal entry template to be used. My file type, I do have several options. In the export job maintenance, we saw that we had a ASCII file or comma delimited file. When we're uploading information, we also have the ability to pull information from Excel. Sometimes we do have issues uploading information from Excel. I think Sage is definitely really fixed up a lot of the holes that they've had. But we do also tell folks we greatly have success with comma delimited files. So most times we tell folks to go ahead and just save this as a CSV file. But in this case, this is a rather simple job, and I've tested it out, and we're able to bring it in exactly as an Excel file. One caveat that I have to do with an Excel file is I have to check off this button on host. If I brought it in as a CSV file, that's not required. A couple of buttons here: skip source data truncation, skip over existing records. Let me just explain skip over existing records. So if we were bringing information into a journal entry and this information already exists, and we only want to bring this information in here, we can actually have the system review and say, hey, if this line already exists, don't bring it in. So we can actually specify skip over existing records if we needed. My data tab, which is where I'm going to spend some time right now explaining, I've created the job to really have a lot of information, and I'm going to demystify what runtime, next, replace, and assign allow us to do. And we're just going to create it from scratch. And the only other thing I'm going to explain is under record, we're going to create a an action that says go ahead and skip a record when field position number 1, column 1, start of that column and the length of that column. So in other words, go to column 1 and the first 7 digits, if it equals a count, then go ahead and skip it. So what that's going to do is it's just going to flat out skip this row and then just start working on every row that doesn't meet those criteria. So let's do this. Let's create a new job. I'm just going to replicate that job line by line so you can kind of see how we create it from scratch. So I'm going to call this GJ entry. I already have it. We'll call this JE entry. It's a new job. I'm going to find my GL general journal header. I'm going to say this job uploads into general journal entry. And I'm going to make this an XLSX document. And I'm going to pull the file that we are looking at right now, which is this file here. I'm going to check off host only because it's an Excel file that I'm using. So now we get to the data tab. So this is a nice upload because the general journal doesn't have that much information for us to use. So it's one of the more easier jobs to upload. If we were looking at item maintenance or sales order entry, we would have about 80 fields that go into those tables because there's a lot of information that goes into a sales order or a purchase order. Here, it's very easy. Account number, debit, credit, comment, and we're set. But if you notice there's an H and there's an L in here, and that's going to correspond, if you recall, I said there's header information in general journal entry and line information. So you'll notice there's also, they're color coded. The blue fields are keys to the upload, and those are required. The light blues or greens are optional, and the reds are a system generated field, and the blacks are optional as well, but they serve a different purpose than these guys. Posting date, reversing date, you can see when we're entering in a journal entry, the green, journal delete and accepted out of balance, you can't see, but what this will allow us to do is actually say, hey, if my entry is out of balance, don't bring it, okay? If I choose to allow it to come in unbalanced, it'll bring it in, but I'll have an issue posting it, so I've got to fix it in general journal entry. So let's start from scratch. And let's see, let's start with our source journal. I'm going to make this a runtime field. So these are my operations. replace, assign, file assign, run assign, incrementally assign, calculated next. I'm going to use about 4 out of these 6, and I'll explain them. A runtime field is like a parameter in Crystal reports. We're actually going to tell the user when we run the job what to enter. So rather than, and I can put a default here, rather than have the user enter in to our source file JE for every row, we can actually have them run it or enter in JE when they're running the job. So runtime field is helpful if every record in your upload is going to be the same, and you just want the user to enter it in. Maybe it's posting date, or it could be journal entry number. Okay, in this case, our journal entry number, we're actually going to have 2 journal entry numbers, so that might not be a good candidate for runtime assign. But source journal, we're going to make it a runtime assign, and I'm going to put a default called JE. Next stop here, entry number. I'm going to make this a next. So in most uploads, VI jobs that we're able to upload entry numbers, PO number, sales order number, invoice number, we have the ability to use the next operator, and it says, go ahead and find the system journal entry number, and it will change it when position number 6 changes. So this goes back to me using this column called transaction number. So it's going to find the next JE number up to this point, and then it's going to flip and create another journal entry at that point. Okay, so we're saying go ahead and give me the next entry number when column 6 changes. So we've now used 2 out of the 6 formats. Posting date, I'm going to bring that over. So now the posting date we have in our source file is column E, or column 5. So I'm going to double click my posting date, and I'm going to say replace. Replace is equivalent to going out to the source file and finding that column in the source file, which is 5, and returning that value as the posting date. Now we also have different masks, so you have to be sure that you kind of match the mask. In this case, I'm using a month, day, year, so that works, but you got to be careful with that to make sure you've got the right format mask. My journal entry, in this case, I'm not doing a reversing date, and it's not required. It's not blue, so I'm going to leave that alone. My journal comment, I'm going to bring that over, and that's in column D, or position 4. That's also going to be a replace, and it's going to be a replace 4. And we're going to keep going. Our accepted out of balance, I'm going to bring over. And you'll notice it actually brought it over, defaulted as an assign field with an N. So now we have another operation, assign. Assign means almost like a runtime assign. We're going to assign every row with an N. All this means is, are we going to accept this entry out of balance? And I'm saying no. That means when you're doing your journal entry, it better balance or the job will fail. Okay, if I said assign yes, I can have an unbalanced entry come in, and it will bring it into general journal entry, but of course I'll have to fix it before I'm able to update it. I'm not going to do anything with allocation number. In our system, in the ABC company, we don't have batches turned on, but if you do have batches turned on, you will want to bring that over. And the interesting thing is we would think that it would make sense to use the next number as a batch number, but for whatever reason, Sage decided to program it a little different. So to find the next batch number, we actually do a replace operation, and we just browse out to a column that doesn't have any information. It could be 10, it could be 20, it could be 50. And we would bring that over all the way to the top and start our job with the batch number. And it'll return the next batch number because we're pointing out to an empty column, and that's just the way the system works. I wish I had a better answer than just pointing it out to an empty column, but that's how we get batch numbers in there. But in our ABC company, we don't have batches turned on, so we're going to leave that alone. Account key. So account key, of course, is column 1. So I'm going to do a replace with column 1. One thing to be careful here is the system has an account key which is different than the account number. If you have an account number that's greater than 9 digits, including the dashes or dots or colons, in this case, my account number is 9 digits, so I'm okay. But if you had an account number that was 10, 11, 14 characters, your job will fail unless you came over here and you told the system to find the account number in column 1, but go ahead and look for the first 14 digits of the account number. If you left this alone, what it would end up doing is looking at the first 9 digits, and then your job will probably fail. Okay. So we're replacing it with column 1. Posting comment is, so posting comment, I'm going to do something interesting here. I'm going to create a calculated field. And you know what? Give me a minute. Before I make it a calculated field, what I want to do is bring over a couple of temp fields. And my temp field is going to be, one of my temp fields is going to be column D for comment, so column 4. This is a line item comment, so I'm going to make it a line record. And then I'm also going to have another comment field, which is my user code, which is column G, so 2467. So I'm going to replace it with 7, and I'm also going to make this a line record. And now what I'm going to do with my comment field is I'm going to make this a calculated field. And down here under my calculated field, I'm going to say, go ahead and make temp number 1, which is my comment. I'm going to put plus with a colon and another plus with temp number 2. So if you kind of think about what's going on here, what I'm doing, if I were doing this in Excel, it would be similar to me coming in and essentially pointing to this column and doing a colon and user, and I would essentially have my comment plus the user that uploaded it. Okay. So I'm doing the same thing, only with Visual Integrator using a calculated formula field. And we can do that. We can also use that if we wanted to add 2 values together. But in this case, I'm really just concatenating or adding 2 columns together to get me my posting comment. Finally, we're left with our debit field, which is column number 2. It's a replace. And last, our credit column, column number 3. So I've used a runtime field, a next field, a replace for most of it because we're getting most of our information from our source file, and then a calculated field so that I can use a couple of temp fields to get me my posting comment. When I go to my records tab, I'm going to say, go ahead and skip wherever column 1, position 1 through 7 equals accounts. So it's going to skip that first row. And that's it. I now have a journal entry job that is ready to go. So I'm going to close this out because it will bark at me if I am in there. And when I go to run my job, of course, it asks me for my source file. And this is my runtime field for source journal, and it's defaulted to JE, and that's fine. I'm going to bring this in as a JE entry. As I said before, I'm going to test it out, and I'm going to test out all records. And there we go. Life is good because it read 31 records. It skipped, I hope it skipped the first record, but what I'm looking for is 0 failed records. Okay, if I have any failed records, I'm going to want to stop and find out what was the cause of failure. And I'm going to show you in a minute, what would happen when we got failed records. But in this case, everything looks good. I have 0 failed records. It skipped my 1 record up top, but everything else looks good. If I were to look at the job log, I would find that I have 1 journal entry that begins here and then the details. Not that you can kind of understand that just by looking at this, but this is my header. And then these are my lines for my depreciation entry. And so I'm going to now run it by hitting the accept button. So accept is go ahead and run it. At this point, it is now creating my journal entry for real. I'm going to go up to my general journal entry, and since I don't have batches turned on, I should have 2 entries sitting out there, one for my payroll entry and another for depreciation. If I look at my first entry, there's my date, my comment, and here's my entry with my comment having both the comment as well as the user that created it. And if I go to my next entry, same thing for depreciation. So if you had a 200-line entry, a 400-line entry, uploading it from Excel will certainly save you from having to do this manually. So let's go back to that job and let's just make a slight change to it. Here's my job. Let's say that I had a keying mistake, and instead of having account numbers, I have the letter A, and instead of having a number here, I have the letter B. Okay, so theoretically these should fail because my account number A doesn't exist, and it's looking for a number here, and I have the letter B. So if I were to run my job again as a test, there we go. And there's my JE entry that we just created. And I'm going to accept it. And I'm going to test it out because I always want to test it out. I'm going to test out all records. And here we go. We have, actually we have 1 failed record. And so I'm going to hit yes to view it. And so now I start getting, that's interesting. I start getting some failures where it says, hey, account number doesn't exist. And so that's my key to look at my source job and and find out if I had a keying error and fix it. And then I can retest my job and make sure that I have 0 failed records, and I'll be good. Now in this case, I put a B in the number. So what it did was, instead of failing it, it moved to 0. But what happens is I'm going to end up having a entry that doesn't balance, and so the job is going to fail. So understanding if you have a failed record, coming in here and looking for the red line is going to tell you where in your job you have an issue, so that you can go in and fix it. Okay, so definitely coming back in here, fixing that row, going back in and testing the job out is typically the normal path for running these jobs. Now, that was a simple job. Another simple job that I've created, an AP invoice. If you look at this job, I kind of have everything I need in here. I have a vendor number, I have an invoice number, I have an invoice date, I have a comment, I have a GL account, an amount. So if you structure the job with all the information you need, then we end up creating a job that kind of looks like this for AP invoice. And here's my job. It's also an Excel job. It's pointing to my AP invoice file. If I go to my data tab, it's all replaces. I don't have any next. I don't have any calculated fields. It's just saying, go find the information in columns 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm not using the invoice amount, because in this table, it's actually taking the sum of the lines and doing it. Now, this is one invoice, okay, with 3 different lines. So if you notice how I set it up, I have to repeat the division number, the vendor number, the invoice number, the invoice date. This is considered header type information. Line type information, the GL account number, amount, and comment, of course, are going to be individual per line. But I have enough information here to create a VI job called AP invoice. If I go to accept and I run it, and I always want to test. Last thing I want to do is hit accept and have some failed records that end up causing me grief. And here we go. We've got one skipped record, which is my header record, and I have no failed records. That's what I want to see. If I go to my tab, I have my header information here, and I have my 3 lines, but no reds. It skipped the first row, which is my header, so life is good. And I'm going to hit accept, and I'm going to hit yes. And I'm going to go into AP invoice data entry. And there's my invoice to airway with all of my header information. Here's my header comment, and then line item information accordingly with my comments. Okay, so this was an easy entry into the invoice. If you have job costs, we would be able to upload job information in here. One thing I do get asked with VI jobs into this area is, hey, how do I stop the system from uploading an invoice that already exists in the system? Because if you're bringing in invoices every day and and you actually erroneously pull yesterday's batch in, the system will actually bring that invoice into the system twice, and it will add to it. So that would not be fun, because now you're going to have an invoice with double the amount of the expense, which is not a good thing. We've created a program that would actually go into the job and say, hey, if the invoice exists, don't bring it in, and only bring in invoices that don't exist. But that would be where we created what's called a pre-process, and we'd create a little program, and we'd add that program in here to your VI job that will do that kind of checking. Otherwise, what you're left to do on your accord is essentially make sure that your job does not have any duplicates. Okay, so definitely, having clean data here, uploading, is going to save you keystrokes, but it, definitely, if you're having automated jobs with invoices, you just have to be careful that you have some stopgap measures, or you could be bringing in some information that you don't intend to. So I also mentioned with version 2018, what the system allows us to do is under Library Master, under Task Scheduler, we now have the ability to create a job, GL entry, where we can upload a VI job on a scheduled basis. So they give us the ability to do it on a daily basis. Right now, it doesn't allow us to go down, below a day, like, every hour, but it's a start. It's, they've definitely given us the ability to do it. So I'm thinking they're probably going to enhance this area in the upcoming versions. But I'm going to go to my task, and I'm going to be uploading a VI job, and there's my general journal, and I can hit accept. And this can be set, again, on a schedule, and that job can be run without human intervention. So if you are exporting information to a text file to be used with a different application, Task Scheduler may be a useful tool with the VI job. And as I mentioned before, one final topic, with our general journal entry job, what I did was create a menu option by hitting my menu button. And so once I get to this job, I can hit my menu button and go through a wizard so that I can actually have a menu job just for this one task. This allows me to provide security to users so that they can only run this job, and I'm not forcing them to go to job select and erroneously run another job. Because if they have rights to go in here, then they have the ability to run jobs. They have the ability to run another job if needed. If we segregate that one job to a task on the menu, then we can assign, through security and role maintenance, this task to just one or a few users. And with that said, I've concluded this discussion or demonstration of Visual Integrator. So we'll look to the notes if there's any questions, or the chat window. I don't see any questions out there. Feel free to enter a question in the chat window if you have one. And I don't see any coming in.
Hi, Rob. So there are actually two questions that came through. I can just go, oh, three now.
Good,
I can just go ahead and read them to you, and then that way you can address.
sure.
Okay, so the first one we have, it says, how does chaining jobs work? For AR cash receipt deposit, it requires two imports.
Yes, yes, good question. So chaining jobs. So in import job maintenance, there is a field called chain. And I'll open this up. And there is a chain to field here. So what this chain to gives us the ability to do is to actually run one job and then chain it to another job. So after this job is done, it's going to automatically prompt you to run this job. So that way, the example that was given is cash receipt entry. In cash receipt entry in AR, we actually have to upload a deposit into a table and then the actual cash receipt entry. So that's probably one of the more complex jobs that we have to run, only because it's just how it works. The system has one table for our deposit number and the other table for the cash receipt information. So rather than, and we end up having to create two separate jobs, one for the deposit and one for the cash receipt. And so if we didn't chain them, we would end up running the deposit job first, and then we'd be kicked out, and then we'd end up having to go in and run our cash receipt job afterwards. So chaining allows us to actually just stay in our upload screens and upload one job and then chain it to another. That's for chaining cash receipt entry. You may have, the need to actually, I have a client that uploads sales orders, from 3 different sources. And so they have 3 different jobs uploading into sales order entry. And so they chain one job after the next so that they don't have to continuously go in and out when they're running their jobs. Good question.
Okay, great. The next one says, can you briefly show how you skip the first record once again?
Sure. So if we go back to our general journal entry job, or actually let's go to the AP invoice entry, but it's the same function. In AP invoice entry in Excel, I have my Excel file with my header, and my first column for division, the header is called AP division. So what I want to do is when I go to my job, I'm going to say, go ahead and skip record, and let me do this from scratch. Go ahead and skip the record where column 1, starting position 1, length 2 equals AP. Okay, so I'm saying, hey, wherever you see AP in column 1, go ahead and skip it. So by default, that's going to skip it. Now, if your job is such that our vendor is in column 1, and we may have a vendor that is called, APN dist, then we probably don't want to have this because it's going to end up skipping, a vendor. So what I would then do is probably have this say, go ahead and skip, column 1, position 7, where the value is AP space vend. And skipping doesn't have to just be on the first column. It could be, you could be skipping a record based on values of any column. But usually when I'm skipping just a header, I want to find something where that title is unique to that column so that I know I'm going to be able to skip it correctly. But that's done in tab number 4, the records tab, using a skip function. Excellent.
Okay, so we have quite a few, about a handful of questions left. So the next question, I believe, relates to this, but it says, how does this differ from GL Exchange?
Excellent. So GL Exchange is another way to upload journal entries into the GL. So it's from that perspective, it's not different. You can upload journal entries through GL Exchange under General Ledger Utilities, and it's somewhat rigid. Of course, you have to set your format for your journal entry in a specific way with General Ledger Exchange. With VI, I'm kind of free to do whatever I want. So from this perspective, for journal entries, you could use General Ledger Exchange to upload it. But of course, for other areas of the system, for uploading items or invoices or sales orders, we don't have that same function that we do at the GL. So that's where VI certainly would be our only option. Good question.
And then it was sent in around the same time, so maybe piggybacking off of the same section is, can this work with multiple companies through intercompany transactions?
No. So, well, actually, if you're using an intercompany add-on to the system, then you're creating the entry in, the ABC company, and you're going to post it, and then it's going to push the information to the other company. So as long as we only have the ability to create the entry in the company that we're in. Okay, so if I were to create an entry in ABC, but I also wanted to post something similar in XYZ, I would have to do my entry in ABC first, and then leave ABC, go to XYZ, and do a separate upload. Now, if I have multiple companies, that means I probably have a intercompany add-on to the system, and there's a few out there. And in that case, then I would be able to upload the entry into my ABC company. And usually, the multi-company add-ons will have the ability to specify which company you want to post to. And then once I post my transaction in ABC, it'll then move over to the other entities. So I guess my answer is, if you have an intercompany module or add-on, then yes, you can enter in the company code into your source file. So this would be ABC XYZ, and we'd have to configure the job accordingly to use this company code, and it would work. If you don't have that intercompany add-on, then you would have to only upload ABC information here and then do a separate upload for XYZ in that company.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so we have a couple more questions. One is there any instructions how to write procedures for perform logic?
Oh, no. I usually leave that to our developers because it takes ProvideX programming to be able to do so. I wish I had a good answer. I'm not a ProvideX programmer, so I usually tell them we need a pre-process, and they'll create the program to do that. So unfortunately, that's not something that I believe you'll be able to do individually.
Okay. And then our last question is if we have a current VI manual. And if we have
Good question.
I can actually do some research on the back end here and send that out with the recording if that's helpful.
Yeah, Sage doesn't have a help. I think there may be some YouTube videos as well from like Sage has an annual conference. So over the years, resellers and consultants have done these types of webinars, and some of them have got deeper into VI. So there may be some good stuff out there. Sage just doesn't have a manual for this module like it does for GL, AR, AP, and even those are online in the help area. Good.
All right, and that wraps up our questions for this afternoon.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Robert. Thanks, everyone. We'll go ahead and distribute the recording in the next day or two, so look out for that. And thank you for joining today. Have a great day, everyone.